For a long time, I believed that pain had a clear beginning and an obvious end, that heartbreak was like a storm. It would arrive, rage, destroy a few things, and then eventually pass, leaving behind a sky that was somehow brighter. I used to think that betrayal was something people survived and then transformed into wisdom. I had no idea it could become a quiet, permanent presence in your life, a shadow that never entirely leaves. My name is Anna, and this is the story of how my marriage ended the day I saw a child who was never supposed to exist, a child who carried the face of the man I thought I knew better than anyone. When I met my husband, Daniel, I was in a phase of my life where everything felt fragile. I'd just lost my father, my job was a mess, and I felt like I was drifting through the days in some sort of numb autopilot. Daniel arrived in my life like a promise of stability. He was calm, charming in a quiet way, and he had this ability to make chaos feel manageable. He listened. He remembered small details. He made me feel like I was safe for the first time in years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I'd planned to leave early, but then Daniel sat next to me at the table and we started talking about nothing and everything. He told me about his job in finance, his love for photography, the way he liked wandering through the city at night just to watch the lights in apartment windows and imagine the lives inside. It sounded poetic at the time. Now it just feels like a warning I didn't recognize. We started dating soon after. Our relationship moved quickly. Within a year, we were living together. Within 2, we were married. People said we were the perfect couple. We looked like one of those curated Instagram feeds, vacations, brunches, matching coffee mugs, little handwritten notes on the fridge that said things like, "Remember milk," and "I love you." I clung to that image like a lifeline. I wanted so badly to believe that I had finally chosen right, that I wasn't walking into another disaster. For a while, everything felt normal, predictable, safe. We had small fights about small things, whose turn it was to do the dishes, which side of the bed was messier, whether his mother was too involved in our lives. But the fights always ended the same way. He would pull me into his arms, apologize in that calm, low voice, and tell me that we were a team, that nothing could break us if we stayed together. I believed him. I had no idea that while I was building a future, he was building a second life. The first signs didn't look like signs at all. They looked like overtime at work, sudden meetings, business trips that appeared on the calendar only a few days in advance. I remember the first time I felt that small, twisting sensation in my stomach. It was a Wednesday night. He texted me that he needed to stay late for a last-minute project. I went to sleep alone, listening to the rain against the window, trying to convince myself that I was being unreasonable. He came home after midnight, smelling like cologne that wasn't his, and a kind of tiredness that didn't look like work. When I asked how it went, he gave me a vague answer about numbers, clients, and deadlines. I told myself I was overthinking. People get busy, people get stressed. Suspicion felt like a betrayal in itself, and I didn't want to become the type of person who snooped or accused. I'd promised myself I would never be like my mother, who spent years obsessively checking my father's phone, tasting paranoia in every late night, until she finally found what she'd been looking for and realized that the truth hurt more than the doubt ever did. I pitied her back then. Now I understand her more than I wish I did. Months went by. Little inconsistencies appeared, then disappeared under explanations that sounded reasonable enough. Late meetings, delayed trains, batteries dying conveniently. I learned how to swallow my questions and smile like everything was fine, but the body always knows when something is wrong, even when the mind refuses to admit it. I started waking up with a knot in my chest. I lost track of conversations because part of me was always trying to calculate, to connect dots that didn't want to connect. I started living in a constant state of almost knowing. The day everything shattered did not begin dramatically. It was a Saturday like any other. I went to the market in the morning, bought vegetables, fruit, and flowers because I liked the illusion of a peaceful domestic life. Daniel said he had to go into the office for a few hours. I kissed him goodbye and told him not to work too hard. He laughed and said he would try. He left around 9. At 11, I was walking back from the market, my arms full of groceries, when I noticed a small crowd gathered near the cafe on the corner. People were smiling, their attention focused on something near the entrance. I might have walked past them, but I heard a woman say in a soft, delighted tone, "That boy has the same eyes as his father." I don't know why that sentence hooked itself into me, but I found myself glancing over, curious, distracted. I didn't see the woman first. I saw the child, a little boy, maybe 3 or 4, standing near a table with a chocolate-smeared mouth and a messy head of dark hair. He was laughing, the kind of free, unguarded laughter that only children have. My first thought was that he was beautiful. My second was that something about him felt disturbingly familiar. Then I saw the man standing behind him. It was Daniel. He wasn't wearing his work clothes. He wasn't at an office. He was standing in front of that cafe, in casual jeans and a sweater I didn't recognize, bent slightly toward the boy with a tenderness that felt like a knife. His eyes were soft, his posture relaxed. He looked happy, the kind of happy I hadn't seen on his face for a long time. Next to him, a woman sat at the table, watching them with a tired kind of affection. She had one hand wrapped around a coffee cup, and the other resting on the stroller next to her. She glanced up at him with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. When the boy stumbled, both of them moved at the same time, reaching for him, instinctively, effortlessly, like two people who had been doing this together for years. The world went silent. The crowds vanished. The street, the cars, the noise, all of it blurred into nothing. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and twisted. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, watching my husband laugh with a child who looked like a cruel, smaller version of his face. I wanted to tell myself it was a coincidence. Maybe it was someone who just looked like him from a distance. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me because I had been suspicious for so long. But then he turned slightly, and there was no room left for denial. It was him. The same small scar near his temple, the same way he tilted his head when he smiled, the same man I had married, now bending down to wipe chocolate from a child's cheek. My vision blurred. The bag slipped from my hands, the groceries spilling onto the pavement, oranges rolling away like tiny fleeing planets. People turned to look at me, but no one said anything. No one came to help. It was as if I had become invisible at the exact moment my life became unbearably visible. I don't remember crossing the street. I don't remember how my body moved. One moment I was standing there, and the next I was walking toward them, each step heavy with disbelief and the sort of numb rage that makes the edges of reality dissolve. Daniel saw me before I reached him. For a second, his face emptied. Every trace of warmth vanished, replaced by stark, naked panic. The color drained from his skin, his mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. The woman followed his gaze, then looked at me. Her eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition of something inevitable finally happening. She looked like someone watching a glass shatter in slow motion, knowing the pieces would be impossible to put back together. I stopped a few steps away from them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. The world had already turned into a scene without my participation. I just stared at him, at the child, at the life I hadn't known he was living parallel to mine. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my throat. In that moment, a strange, detached thought crossed my mind. This is the part of the movie where the audience holds their breath. The boy looked at me curiously, then at Daniel, then back at me. There was a question in his eyes that stabbed deeper than anything else. He had no idea who I was. He had no idea his very existence was a confession. I think Daniel tried to speak. His mouth moved, but I don't remember the words. Maybe he said my name. Maybe he tried to come up with some lie, some excuse. But there are moments in life when words stop mattering, when the truth is already so loud that everything else sounds like background noise. I turned around and walked away. I left the groceries scattered on the pavement. I left the cafe behind. I left my husband standing there with his double life exposed under the pale daylight. I kept walking until my legs felt weak, until my eyes burned, until the city blurred into something unrecognizable. At home, the apartment felt different. Every object suddenly seemed like evidence. The framed photos, the shared bills, the extra toothbrush in the bathroom, the pile of laundry, the half-empty bottle of wine we had opened the night before. It all felt staged, like a set built to convince me I was living one story while he was secretly starring in another. I sat on the living room floor and stared at the door, waiting for him to come home. Time became a thick, suffocating thing. Minutes dragged into hours, each tick of the clock scraping against my nerves. I didn't cry. Not yet. There was a part of me that refused to crumble before I had all the answers. He came back after what felt like a lifetime. He entered the apartment slowly, like someone stepping into a crime scene. I could smell fear on him before he even spoke. His eyes were red, his hair messy, his shoulders tense. He looked at me sitting there on the floor and froze. The questions I had were simple on the surface and devastating underneath. Who is that child? How long has this been going on? Who is she? How could you do this? Why didn't you tell me? Did you ever love me? He tried to talk his way around them at first. He said it wasn't what it looked like, that it was complicated, that I didn't understand, that he had been meaning to tell me. The more he spoke, the more hollow his words sounded. I watched him like I was watching a stranger trying to negotiate with the wreckage of my life. Eventually, the truth came out in fragments. The woman was someone from his office. It started, he said, during a rough patch in our marriage, as if there were any way to justify what he had done. It was supposed to be nothing. It was supposed to end quickly, but then she got pregnant. She wanted to keep the baby. He panicked, believed he could handle both lives at once. He convinced himself that if I never found out, it wouldn't really destroy anything. He had been living this lie for over 3 years. While I was planning holidays, he was planning excuses. While I was waiting for him to come home late from meetings, he was giving goodnight kisses to a child who carried his eyes. While I was counting anniversaries, he was counting birthdays I never knew existed. The more details he revealed, the colder I felt. Betrayal isn't just the moment you discover the truth. It's the realization that your memories have been poisoned, that your entire past rearranges itself around a secret you were never allowed to see. I asked him if he had ever considered telling me. He said he was afraid. He didn't want to lose me. He didn't want to lose his real life. That was the phrase that broke something inside me. His real life. As if mine was the illusion. I realized then that he had never truly seen me as a partner, only as an anchor, something to keep him steady while he wandered wherever he wanted. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I didn't throw him out. I simply told him to sleep in the guest room. My voice was calm, almost gentle. I think that scared him more than if I had lost control. The next days were a blur of paperwork, silent meals, restless nights, and the kind of conversations that feel like waking up in a nightmare you can't escape. He said he was sorry again and again, like repetition could transform his regret into redemption. He said he would leave her, that he would fight for us, that we could go to therapy, that we could rebuild, But you can't rebuild a house when the foundation itself is rotten. Everything we had shared was standing on top of something I hadn't known about. Every memory had been sharing space with a lie. There was no version of our story that remained intact. I filed for divorce. He cried when I told him. He begged me to reconsider. He said this didn't have to be the end. He promised he would do anything. But apologies are strange things. They can be honest and still arrive too late. There is a point at which sorrow becomes irrelevant. I wish I could say that the pain ended the moment I decided to leave, that signing papers cured the ache, but endings are rarely clean. The weeks turned into months, and I found myself haunted by images I couldn't unsee. Him laughing with that boy. The softness in his voice when he talked about his mistakes, as if the child itself was not a person, but an error in calculation. The way he had tried to protect his double life more fiercely than he had ever protected my heart. I started seeing a therapist. I started going on long walks at night, trying to reclaim the city streets that once belonged to our shared routines. I blocked his number more than once, only to unblock it when legal matters required cold, practical communication. Every time his name appeared on my phone, my chest tightened with a mixture of anger and exhaustion. In the quiet moments, I wondered what would happen to the boy. He hadn't asked to be born into the role of evidence. He hadn't chosen to become the living proof of betrayal. He was innocent, yet his existence was tied to the worst experience of my life. I felt guilty for resenting the sight of his face. Even in memories, I knew none of this was his fault, but my heart couldn't separate him from the wound he represented. Time moved. Slowly, stubbornly. Outside of my world, life went on. People fell in love, got married, had children, posted pictures of their happiness online. I learned how to smile politely when others talked about anniversaries and family vacations. I became an expert at nodding along while feeling like I was watching life through thick glass. Meanwhile, karma began to unwind itself around Daniel. It started at work. Affairs have a way of refusing to stay secret forever, especially when they involve colleagues. Whispers turned into rumors. Rumors turned into tension. The company didn't like scandal. They especially didn't like complications that could affect their image. When the truth finally reached the wrong people, he was quietly pushed out. No dramatic firing, no big confrontation, just fewer responsibilities, fewer projects, fewer invitations, until one day there simply was no place for him anymore. Then it spread to his social circle. Friends he had boasted to about his double life in drunken, arrogant confidence suddenly didn't find him so entertaining. Some were disgusted. Some quietly distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the mess. Others remained, but their presence was hollow, built on convenience rather than loyalty. The solid network he had once wrapped himself in slowly thinned out. His family, who once adored me and posted pictures of us on holidays with captions about love and destiny, were divided. His mother called me privately to apologize for what her son had done. She said she understood my decision. She didn't excuse him. That hurt him more than anything I could have said. The other woman, the mother of his child, grew tired of being the secret, tired of half-commitments, tired of carrying the weight of his choices. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, their relationship became a battlefield. The fantasy life he had been trying to maintain split under the pressure of reality, financial stress, legal disputes, a crying child, judgment from others. The crushing awareness that he had built his new life on the ruins of the old one. One evening, months after the divorce was finalized, he called. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, his voice sounded older, thinner, drained of the confidence it used to carry so easily. He said he wanted to see me, to talk, to explain. I told him there was nothing left to explain. The story was over. The damage was done. He said he was sorry again, But this time the words sounded less like a performance and more like a man finally realizing the full consequences of his actions. I hung up, feeling strangely empty and strangely free. Karma is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like a slow unraveling, a gradual stripping away of illusions until a person is left face to face with themselves. I didn't need to witness every detail of his downfall to know it was happening. I could hear it in his voice. I could sense it in the way people referred to him now, not as the charming, stable man everyone admired, but as the one who destroyed his own life. As for me, I began the long, patient work of rebuilding. I changed the apartment, new furniture, new paint, new habits. I took the wedding photos down and eventually threw them away. I donated the gifts we had received as a couple, the ones that made my chest tighten every time I opened a drawer. I learned how to cook for one without feeling pathetic. I discovered that I slept better across the entire bed instead of staying politely on my side. I started traveling alone, short trips at first, then longer ones. I sat in cafes in cities where no one knew my name and let myself disappear into the anonymity. I watched people and listened to conversations and realized that the world was larger than the story I had been trapped in. I read books about women who rebuilt their lives after loss. I found pieces of myself in their words. Slowly, the rage cooled into something else, not forgiveness exactly. I don't know if I will ever fully forgive what he did. But I stopped waking up every day with the same burning questions. I stopped replaying events in my head, trying to find the moment where everything started to go wrong. I stopped blaming myself for not seeing it sooner. I understood, at last, that loving someone does not make you responsible for their deceit. There are still nights when I think of the little boy. I imagine him growing up, entering school, making friends, asking questions about his parents. I wonder what story he will be told about how his family came to be. I hope, for his sake, that it will be a kinder version than the one that lives in my memory. I hope he will be loved fully by people who are finally honest with themselves and with him. He did not ask to be born into a story of betrayal. He deserves better than to carry that burden. Sometimes people tell me I am strong. They say it with admiration, as if strength was a prize I won instead of something I had no choice but to develop. The truth is, I do not feel strong most of the time. I feel like someone who survived a fire and is still learning how to live with the scars. But I also know this. I am no longer the woman who needed someone else to make her feel safe. I have seen what happens when you hand your entire sense of security to another person. I have watched that foundation crumble, and I have learned how to stand again on my own feet. There is a quiet power in that. If there is one thing I take from all of this, one bitter lesson that has slowly turned into something like clarity, it is this. Betrayal is not proof that you were foolish. It is proof that someone else chose cowardice over honesty. They chose the illusion of comfort over the difficult work of truth. That is their failure, not yours. Daniel will live with what he did for the rest of his life. Every time he looks at his child, he will see both love and the cost of his actions. Every time he meets someone new, he will know what he is capable of, and he will have to decide whether or not he repeats that story. That is his karma. Mine is different. My karma is the life I am building now, piece by piece, no longer based on someone else's version of reality. My karma is the peace that comes when you finally step out of a lie and learn how to breathe again. My karma is knowing that I walked away, that I chose myself, that I refused to stay in a place where I was being quietly erased. One day, maybe I will fall in love again, or maybe I won't. That part of the story is still unwritten. What matters is that, for the first time in a long time, I am not afraid of a future that doesn't look the way I once imagined. I was betrayed. I was humiliated. I was broken open. But I was not destroyed. And sometimes, in the quiet after the chaos, that is enough.